I can't feel my toes. Hi. If you're new here, my name is Amalia Solaris. I'm a Divine Forest Dragon, and I'm currently freezing my tail off. You know, some people say that this is the most wonderful time of the year, and they're objectively wrong, because October was 2 months ago. Even dragons are not immune to feeling perpetually eepy this time of year, so I'm a little tired as I record this, but I'm sure you'll forgive me, right? Right? Winter blues and feeling constantly tired aside, I wanted to talk a little bit about a certain question that I get asked a lot, actually. As a big Nintendo fan, I actually get asked a lot what I wish for from Nintendo, and I think it's really funny because if you've ever listened to me talk for like more than 5 minutes, it's probably super obvious. But with that being said, I actually do have a lot that I wish for from Nintendo. Probably more than you would expect. Now, given that it's the holiday season and the end of the year, I thought I'd go ahead and put together a wish list for basically all things Nintendo going beyond 2024. Now, when I do wish lists, I don't hold back at all, because why would you? It's a wish list! You're supposed to be self-indulgent and very, very goofy. So that's what this wish list is gonna be. It's gonna be horribly self-indulgent and horribly goofy. And we're just gonna have a fun time with it. Now, I'm totally aware as I make this list that Nintendo probably won't do any of these, or maybe if they do, they'll do like 1 or 2. And that's okay. That's okay. I'm still putting them on my wish list because I want to. And that's a good enough reason for me. Now, there will be no further preamble from me, but there will be a small reminder to watch this video to the end because there will be a cool announcement as well as a sneak peek. So get excited and don't sneak ahead. Don't spoil it. Don't be that guy. 2 small caveats. Caveat number 1, I am only going to be covering games on this list. I will not be covering non-games. If I do a wish list for non-games, it will be its own video. Caveat number 2, I will only be covering things that I feel like are not guaranteed, as opposed to things that I feel like are a matter of time. So some things that I feel like are a matter of time are things like Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD for the Switch or Switch 2. I feel like those things will come. It's just a matter of when. Another thing that I feel like is a matter of when is stuff like Donkey Kong 64 and Diddy Kong Racing on NSO. I feel like those things will happen. It just may be a while. Another thing is GameCube games on NSO. Again, those are just kind of like matter of time things. Obviously, I want all of those, but I'm not going to put them on this wish list because this wish list is specifically new games, remasters, and remakes I would like to see, and I will be going in as much detail as I really want for each one, because I have some ideas. As a Christmas celebrator, I would like for Nintendo Claus to bring me the following for 2025 and beyond. Alright, let's get the obvious one out of the way. First, I would really like a Star Fox Adventure remake. Now, I have some very specific wants for this remake, and I don't even know how to get started with some of these without launching into a tangent about the entire development cycle, but I will do my best to make this as concise as possible. To rapidly abbreviate the entire Star Fox Adventures development thing, there was a game that was being made by Rareware called Dinosaur Planet. It featured Saber and Crystal, 2 characters that would be roaming Dinosaur Planet and fulfilling various objectives, collecting the spellstones, saving the spirits. Basically, as development continued, the game ended up getting the Star Fox IP slapped onto it. There is a whole discussion to be had about all of that. That's for another day. Fox McCloud ended up replacing Saber, and there was a point in the development process where the Star Fox IP did not really eclipse the Dinosaur Planet IP, and you had Fox running around, and you also had Crystal running around the planet. And you also had some tie-ins with the Star Fox IP with Dinosaur Planet, so you'd have like Crystal's adopted father, Randorn, ended up knowing Fox's dad, James. And Randorn has some dialogue about Pigma at one point in this kind of beta version of Star Fox Adventures. This is honestly the Star Fox Adventures I would like to see, is this version that was kind of more like, I would say 80% Dinosaur Planet and like 20% Star Fox. I would really like to see that particular one. And I say that because a lot of the cut content in this version is really interesting. We had a totally different bad guy than Andros. We had a really, really interesting plot with like time travel and ancient civilizations at war with each other, and there were dragons. Of course, I'm biased because there's dragons. There were a lot of cut areas and cut bosses and just a lot of really cool stuff that unfortunately just got totally axed during development. A lot of it was because Rareware at the time was going through being bought by Microsoft. And so unfortunately, by the time that Star Fox Adventures came out, the game was, I would say, down 1/3 of the content that was originally planned. It came out 66% done, basically. And some people might ask me why I want this particular version of Star Fox Adventures instead of just the original Dinosaur Planet. The answer to that is actually a little bit complicated, and it delves into the self-indulgence part of this wish list. I want Star Fox Adventures to be a separate spin-off series from Star Fox. And I want, in this particular series, for it to be focused on out-of-vehicle combat. And I would like for it to also explore the planets of the Lylat system. And I know this is incredibly self-indulgent. I warned you guys at the start of this video. I warned you that it was going to be really self-indulgent. But I do think I like the idea of adventures. I like the idea of it being part of the Star Fox universe. I think that it has the potential to kind of like birth its own kind of spin-off for Star Fox. Rather than just be like a standalone random adventure game, I would really like to see more Star Fox that's like this, where you're on the planets and you're getting like more lore about the planets, and you're getting to like meet characters and see like the landscape and go to different places on various planets in the Lylat system. I've never seen anybody else say this, actually. I feel kind of weird for suggesting that maybe we let the Dinosaur Planet IP kind of like rest. But for those people who are like, well, what about like Saber or like Randorn? It's like, well, Randorn was in that version of Star Fox Adventures that I'm even like talking about remastering. As for Saber, what if we just like left him in the game? What if there were 3 playable characters? That way you have Crystal with her staff, Saber with his sword, and Fox with his blaster, because we all know it made no sense for General Pepper to say he couldn't use his blaster. Let's be real. To take it a couple steps further, Saber is kind of a melee-oriented character in a sort of tank-like role. Fox is like a ranged kind of fighter with his blaster. And then Crystal is, yeah, she's a bit of both, but she kind of has more of a focus on magic. I mean, if you kind of squint your eyes and tilt your head, it kind of looks like an RPG party, which could be really cool. Could be really cool. I mean, my vision is more like you play one at a time. But I think it'd be really cool if you had like maybe both of them following you as whichever one you'd want to play as, and they have some sort of AI, maybe in certain sections as you're kind of exploring Dinosaur Planet. Now, I was not joking when I said a remake of this, and I'm not obviously talking about a one-to-one remake. I would like for this particular vision to see reality, even though I know it's probably not going to happen. I just think it'd be a cool way to kickstart a sort of spin-off series for Star Fox. One that kind of dives in, again, more into like the planet exploration and the lore and stuff like that. I feel like there is a market there for that. Now, some people might say, oh, it's, you know, I mean, Star Fox Adventures was definitely inspired by Ocarina of Time and 3D Zelda. I think that if you kind of take a different spin on that sort of like 3D action adventure gameplay, maybe you kind of make it more about exploration. Maybe you could kind of do away with some of the puzzles or change them so that they're different from kind of the vibe that you'd get from Zelda puzzles. I know some people are going to say as well, okay, if you have this kind of like exploration sci-fi thing, don't we already have Metroid? To which I say, we had, in this last year or two, a Mario RPG remake, a Thousand Year Door remake, and a Mario and Luigi game. And I saw nobody complaining about 3 turn-based RPG Mario games and trying to make that same argument. So I'm taking that argument and I'm chucking it into the trash can. We can have multiple of the same genre and it's fine. We don't need to be like, okay, Metroid is the game that is sci-fi and exploration based. We don't need to do that. The vibes of Metroid and Star Fox are very different. And so I feel as though any game, even if they have exploration and maybe both have some light puzzles and stuff like that, I think that they're just so different that they're not gonna feel the same. Another thing that you could possibly do, since Star Fox is like a mercenary team, you could kind of have like a bit of an emphasis on like establishing bases on the planet. You could also put an emphasis on like fast travel points with your R-Wing. You could also put emphasis on combat. Metroid does feel like it has an emphasis on exploration, and Zelda has a lot of emphasis on puzzles. If you really want another game to stand out, put an emphasis on combat, because I feel like that's the thing that the other 2 games don't really do from what I've seen. I haven't played that many Metroid games. I've only played the one, and that was Zero Mission. But still, I really do feel in a world where we just had a Thousand Year Door remake and a Mario RPG remake and a Mario and Luigi game back to back to back, people can take that genre argument and they can kiss it goodbye. Yeah, they can do that. On a more serious note though, with this spin-off idea, I feel like if we commit to something that is exploration based with an emphasis on combat and then some light puzzling, and then you add in the like Star Fox sarcasm and lightheartedness and banter and just kind of that vibe that Star Fox brings, I think you're gonna see something that's really unique and has its own identity, and I think people will like it. And I think it could be kind of interesting for people who do want to see this series do more because it has a lot of potential. And I know a lot of people want the series to stay in a way that's like, oh, you're only in the R-Wing or the Landmaster or the Blue Marine or the Walker or whatever. I think this is a really good compromise for people who are more wanting that sort of like lore and character interaction than just an arcade shooter, because I do recognize that there is a bit of the fan base that wants an arcade shooter. I think it would be good to have both of these games for the IP and for the IP to expand. Now, obviously Star Fox is not a big, seller, but this is a wishful thinking list, right? Like we're not talking about things that are most likely to happen. We're just being indulgent and goofy. If I could snap my fingers, I would have them remake Star Fox Adventures with these ideas in mind. And then it would launch a spin-off series where we went to other planets such as Fortuna, Venom, and what would be another good one? I think Titania would be really cool. Or I could say Aquas and we could literally just have Star Fox Subnautica. Yeah, actually, as someone with thalassophobia, maybe we skip Aquas. Maybe we skip that one. Anyways, that one went entirely too long. Next on the list, taking a small break from Space Furries, let's talk about anime swordsmen. Hey! So at this point in the video, you're gonna notice the audio is gonna sound a little different. That is because usually during these videos, I record everything in one session. I just keep it as consistent as possible, right? However, with this particular video, I ended up recording it in multiple sessions, and during this time, I ended up getting a new mic and setting all of that up. So now, from this point on, we have the new mic. Yay! We love the new mic. Okay, nice little intermission. Let's go back to talking about whatever it was we were talking about. Anime guys, I think. Anime swords fighters. That thing we need more of in Smash Bros. Anyways, now that I've made somebody mad in the comments, I'm gonna go now back to the video. Many, many years ago, little Amalia was at Walmart with Mama Solaris, And during this trip to Walmart, they walked by the video game section, which was honestly probably a dangerous choice for Mama Solaris to make because little Amalia loved her little video games. So on that particular day, little Amalia looked over and saw that there was a Game Boy Advance case, but there was a character on the front that she recognized, and that made little Amalia very excited. And on the box, it read Fire Emblem. This happened during the GameCube era, so Super Smash Bros. Melee was a newer game that was very exciting to little Amalia. Little Amalia actually played a lot of Super Smash Bros. Melee during those years. And little Amalia liked to play as Marth, because little Amalia thought Marth was cool. But little Amalia recognized Roy, or thought she recognized Roy. Anyways, little Amalia convinced Mama Solaris to purchase Fire Emblem. And ever since then, it's all been downhill. I mean, heck, I am literally a green-haired divine dragon, legally distinct, of course. And what a lot of people didn't know at the time, myself included when I picked up the game, is that Fire Emblem 7 is actually a prequel to Fire Emblem 6. I know that doesn't make sense in terms of numbering, but that's just how they released them. So, Fire Emblem 6 is the Fire Emblem with Roy. Fire Emblem 7 has Eliwood, who is Roy's father and looks a lot like him. I think it would be really cool, since Fire Emblem 6 never made it to North America, if they were to give us Fire Emblem 6 and Fire Emblem 7 as a remake bundle. I know, probably not going to happen where they are both remade and bundled together. That is extremely wishful thinking, but I still want it. I want the Elib duo, I think that's how you pronounce the world in those two games. I want the Elib duo to be a thing. I want them to both be, officially localized and released in America. There are fan translations of Fire Emblem 6 that do exist. I would like for them to be modernized, though. I'd like for both of the games to be modernized because they're a bit different from the Fire Emblem games we have now. There was just not as much, I guess, game mechanics and content back then. In the Fire Emblem games, it was mostly just a linear story that you played through, and then there were 3 different stories you could play through. But I would really like for them to take both games, give them a full remake in 3D for the Switch 2 in particular. I'd like for the soundtrack to be orchestrated. I would like for the cutscenes to be kind of like how they were in Engage, where it wasn't just like their portraits talking. I'd like for the models to be more like animated, kind of like an Engage. But I want like the level of individual writing from Three Houses per character, because I think Three Houses did characters really well, whereas Engage did not. I would really like for that sort of treatment for Fire Emblem 7 and 6. And I'd like for them to be, if they're not bundled together, then I would like for them to release 6, and I would like for them to release 7, maybe a year or two later. This should probably fix a few things, though, with 6. I know that there's some grievances with Roy's stats in particular. Just some little fixes here and there would go miles, I think. Just modernize both of them. I want, like, a hub, kind of like in the more modern games. I know in Three Houses we have Garrick Mach Monastery. In Engage you have the Somniel. I would like just something kind of like that for Fire Emblem 6 and 7. They both get hubs. A few other things. I would like for them to restructure Fire Emblem 7 because it has 3 stories. One of them is Lynn's story, and her story is kind of a prologue to Hector's story and Eliwood's story. Hector's story and Eliwood's story, they both occur simultaneously, and one of them, it's just from Hector's POV and one's from Eliwood's POV. I think that kind of storytelling works really well in like Three Houses, where the game is kind of built on that. I don't know if I feel the same way though about Fire Emblem 7. I feel like Hector's story was just kind of like Eliwood's story, but like with extra DLC, if that makes any sense. And I really did not like that the big plot twist about the villain, Nergal, was hidden in Hector's story, and it was incredibly easy to miss. Or at least it was hidden to me. I feel like I ran the whole story and I just never ran into Nergal's story. And that was kind of a shock to find out, even having been obsessed with the game when I was a kid. I didn't even know about it until I was an adult. The whole plot twist with Nergal. I don't really want to say what it is, but it's really interesting. It adds a lot of nuance to the character. Fire Emblem 7 and Fire Emblem 6 both have just incredible villains, I think. Really, really good villains. And really, really, really interesting, like, ways that the villains are motivated. Just interesting villain motivation. It's kind of like, yeah, it's, you know, tropey in some regards, but they do it really well. I know this is turning into me just shilling those games, but back on track. I would like for them to restructure or consider restructuring Fire Emblem 7. I don't really know if we need an Eliwood and a Hector, you know, story being separate. I don't really like the idea of like unlockable levels where you have to do really particular things in order to unlock the level. I don't know if I really like that. I'd rather them just be paralogs like they have in the modern Fire Emblems. I'd rather them just do that. Obviously, just overworld skirmishes would be very nice because that was a game that had no overworld skirmishes. You had to just level in the linear story, and if you were behind on that, if you just didn't level your lord in time, like you could easily screw yourself over in a run of Fire Emblem 7. So I'd really like for them to kind of modernize it so you don't have to deal with stuff like that and add stuff like, you know, casual mode. For those who don't want to deal with permanent unit loss if the unit falls in battle. It's kind of nice for the people who prefer that experience. So, you know, have that kind of stuff in. Modernize it. Maybe you could leave Hector's story in. I just feel like it's a little redundant. For Fire Emblem 6, I would just really, really, really go back and tweak the stats because I've heard that there's some issues with some of the party members you can have and their stats just being absolute doo-doo. So maybe we go back and do some balancing stuff and then just, again, modernize everything. And honestly, if they do that, I think it'd be perfect. I would love it. I think a lot of other people would love it. You know, we have Roy in Fire Emblem, but his game has never, ever shown up in North America. And I think it's time that it did. And I think it's time to remake Fire Emblem 7 because it's just a really freaking good game too. I could talk about this forever though, and this video is already proving to be super long, so let's move on to the third thing. I would like, for my third wish, a Splatoon IP expansion. Yeah, we're talking big. Look, Splatoon sells really freaking well, and they have a lot to play with this IP. It would actually be a shame if they kept on just doing, you know, one game every 5 years. Like, that's like, you know, fine, but we could do more with this. Specifically, I want Splatoon to have spin-off games. I can think of several ideas. Here they are. Nintendo, take notes. I want a game where you play as Captain Cuttlefish during the old turf war. I think that would be really cool. Captain Cuttlefish versus DJ Octavio. I think it'd be really cool if they took that idea and they turned it into like a stealth game. Like Metal Gear Solid, but octopus and squid. I feel like maybe you're playing as Captain Cuttlefish during his prime and you're having to sneak into Octoling territory. At least in terms of Nintendo games, I don't think we have a dedicated stealth game or dedicated stealth IP. And I think this idea is really different and also fun. Captain Cuttlefish sneaking in, getting intel from the Octolings about their like strategies and stuff, you know, defending Inkopolis. I think that'd be really cool, and I think it'd be cool to see how different the world was back then. I want like Squidbeak Splatoon lore, like the OG Squidbeak Splatoon lore. That'd be kind of crazy. I'd love that. Splatoon is such a weird series because on the surface, it doesn't really seem that deep, but as soon as you start looking at the lore, it goes really deep. Like, they thought about that lore so much, and that lore kind of goes off the rails a few times, but like in the best way possible. With regards to a stealth game, there's already stuff you can play with stealth anyways with Splatoon. You know, we have like Ink Ninja, you know, where you like sneak in your ink and stuff like that. That's kind of what that's kind of the idea that inspired this, was like Ink Ninja. Like what could you do with that in like a single player campaign? You know, and in my mind, this is like a single player campaign. Maybe, you know, you do have some sort of multiplayer mode, but in my mind, it's like a single player like stealth campaign, kind of like Metal Gear Solid, but you know, with the Splatoon aesthetic and the Splatoon humor. I feel like that could be really fun. For another game, we literally just had a DLC that was a roguelike. And that, I thought, went really well. Like, I have some gripes about Side Order. I really feel like the story could have been stronger. I feel like the ending was kind of not effective, especially compared to Octo Expansion. But that aside, I think Side Order was a really good time. It's a good showcase of Splatoon gameplay working in a roguelike setting. I would like a full game where you're Agent 3 and you're having to investigate an old human structure, and it is like in a roguelike way, you know, kind of like Side Order. I think they could just make that its own thing, and that would be really cool. You know, they'd have to expand it quite a bit. I think Side Order was like a good foundation, but I think they'd have to expand it quite a bit, you know, make it longer, add bit more boss variety, and a bit, maybe some different objective varieties as well. They had some good stuff going. It was a little lacking in that department, but it was like a good foundation, you know? It's kind of one of those, like, this is like a good start, but I want them to do this again, but I want them to do it a little bit more. Like, dial it up maybe like 25%, and I think it'd be perfect. And, you know, I said Agent 3 earlier, but I think it'd be really cool if we played as Agent 4. You know, the Splatoon 2 protagonist who has been missing in action since Splatoon 2. It's to the point where people are making memes about Agent 4 either being dead or missing. I know that in Side Order, there is a nod to Agent 4. Whatever hairstyle you used for your Agent 4, there's a boss that takes on the appearance of your Agent 4 and uses that same hairstyle, which is really cool, but also kind of terrifying, and I still have a lot of questions about that. Anyways, basically have your protagonist be they Agent 4 or 3 or Neo 3 even, and give them a new adventure. You know, have them just like exploring like a human structure, and then something happens, and every time they get splatted like X amount of times, they get sent to the start or something, you know? Something like that would be just really cool, I think. Really, really cool. Another idea, I have so many of these Splatoon spinoff ideas. I really do feel like Splatoon has a lot of potential. Okay, hear me out. This is kind of wild. I mean, it's not any more wild than like Metal Gear Solid Splatoon, but hear me out. Splatoon Warriors. They could do it. If they're going to do another Nintendo Warriors game, I don't want them to touch Zelda again. They did it twice, and it was like decent, and then it was like kind of blah. I want them to do Splatoon Warriors if they're going to do another Warriors game. I think that Splatoon actually has a good setup for it. In terms of the world, there's so many different options you could pick. You could have the main character fighting the Salmonids. And I mean, of course, you could have the main character fighting the Octarian army. But we've done that a lot with Splatoon 1 and 2. I kind of wonder if it'd be interesting to see a game where you play as an Octarian soldier, maybe Agent 8 before they defect, and have them fighting Inklings in Splatoon Warriors. This idea would take place before Octo Expansion, of course, but I think it would be kind of interesting, and it would give you some insight as to what the Octarian army is kind of like. Honestly, you could do something again with Mr. Grizz. You could have him return, and maybe he has some enemy forces. You could have it be remnants of the human world. Maybe there's some old human army, some old human robot AI army or something like that. There's a lot you could really do with this. And you know what? Worst case scenario, you just invent a new bad guy faction. Done. Okay, but I guess like the thing I really want to say about this is I just want more Splatoon IP games that aren't necessarily like another mainline game, because I think that Splatoon's world, again, it just has a lot of potential. So it feels underutilized in the way that they're going about it right now. They could use these spin-off games to also spotlight some characters that maybe don't get as much of the attention in the mainline games, or maybe, you know, they could throw in the idols in these games. I feel like you can't really have a Splatoon game without the idols, be it, you know, Off the Hook, Squid Sisters, or, you know, Deep Cut. They could add more lore to those characters, and people love those characters. They'd eat that up, you know? I know Warriors games are kind of hit or miss. I know stealth games can be kind of hit or miss with people, but I feel like there's just a lot of opportunity here, and I feel like they could just do more with that IP, and I think it'd be really cool. I think that IP could set up a lot of genre experiments, if that makes any sense. And the IP is big already. You have IP recognition. You might as well take advantage of that, right? So that is my hope for Splatoon. I just want there to be more games, but not necessarily like Splatoon 4, Splatoon 5. Like, I know Splatoon 4 is coming. I know Splatoon 5 will probably happen because Splatoon is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but I want them to do more with the IP, and I want them to make spin-off games. Moving on. I would really, really like it if Nintendo Claus gave me a new Donkey Kong Country game, which I know will probably happen, but I want very specific things, so it's going on this list anyways. I would like for this particular game to bring back a lot of old favorites. I want Chunky back, I want Lanky back, I want Tiny back, and you know what? I'm gonna say it, I want Kitty back. Bring me back Kiddy Kong. Let's have the Kiddy Kong redemption arc. And I say this because I feel like we had all these cool characters in these games, and then they kind of got like reduced down or just flat out forgotten. I mean, there was a whole like freaking meme that Chunky was dead for decades because he just like vanished, and we never saw Chunky again for the longest time. We saw Lanky, but not Chunky. And I feel like it's time to bring some of those old favorites back. Even Kiddy Kong. I'm tired of hearing about how Kiddy Kong sucks. Listen, look at him. That is like a baby. That is a child. They're like, oh, he's so annoying. I'm like, yeah, he's a kid. I bet you were annoying too when you were his age. Bring him back. Specifically because his haters are very annoying. Anyways, I would like to see these characters return. I do. Anyways, speaking of characters returning that I want King K. Rool back. Now, I know that's a very popular opinion, and I know some people are saying that they don't have the rights to King K. Rool. Apparently they do. Apparently they've always had the rights to King K. Rool. They just have not used him. I know when Donkey Kong Country Returns came out and there was the new enemies, people were saying it's because King K. Rool and the Kremlings were Rare properties, so they went with Rare when Rare was bought by Microsoft. Apparently that is not the case, and even if it was, I mean, they got Banjo in Smash, and they got King K. Rool in that game too. They could work something out for a Donkey Kong Country game, but I'm like pretty sure that King K. Rool could be added back in to the franchise. I'm pretty sure he could have been the villain this entire time, but for some reason, they just haven't been using him. They just wanted to experiment. You know what? Actually, I'm okay with them experimenting, but I want him back. And specifically with King K. Rool, because I said I was going to be specific about this one, and there's specific things that I wanted. I want King K. Rool to break the fourth wall with a sledgehammer, and I want his like thing to be that he's come back from the dead. I think that could be really cool. It kind of like goes back to the darker Super Nintendo vibes of Donkey Kong Country. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but the first 3 Donkey Kong Countries for the Super Nintendo were kind of dark in some parts. And Returns and Tropical Freeze, on the other hand, the newer ones, well, they're really good. At least I've heard Returns is good, and I've played Tropical Freeze twice, and I adore that game. I want them to go back to that like weird kind of dark vibes of the older games. I think that could be really interesting, especially in this modern era, especially if the games control as well as Tropical Freeze. That would be really cool. I want it to be a little bit weird. I want it to be a little bit unsettling, and I want it to be good. But wait, there's more. I don't just want King K. Rool to come back. I don't just want a giant return of all the old characters, and I don't just want the game to have more of the tone of the first 3 games. I have written down specific world themes that I would like to see. Nintendo, take note. Let's start from the top. I would like for them to add a desert themed world. I feel like that is something that they have not done yet in terms of Donkey Kong Country. Now, there was Angry Aztec in Donkey Kong 64. I think that is the only time they have ever done a desert-themed level, and that was for the 3D platformer, so I'm not really counting that. They've never done a Donkey Kong Country game with a desert world. I want them to do a desert world. I think it'd be cool if they had quicksand as a mechanic, where if you stay still for too long, maybe you start to sink into the sand. I think that could be kind of interesting. Maybe there's like some ruins you can go through for some of the levels as well. I'd also like to see a jungle-themed world. Now, it's Donkey Kong Kong Country, so you kind of have to have one, but I want this one to be different because they always just put in a jungle-themed world, and that's fine because it's Donkey Kong Country, you kind of expect that, but I want them to do something different with it. I want them to make the world a prehistoric / dinosaur jungle. A jungle that is themed around this kind of like prehistoric vibe. It's kind of like ancient, it's like super dangerous feeling. I want there to be dinosaurs because dinosaurs just improve every single game, in my opinion. It'd be kind of different from what they usually do. Kind of like an old nod to Rareware, if anything, because Rareware is the, studio that used to make Donkey Kong Country, and they put dinosaurs in everything except for Donkey Kong Country, which is kind of a missed opportunity, honestly. They could do some fun stuff with that. So I want to see a dinosaur-themed jungle world, and definitely a T-Rex chase. For the next world, I would like for them to do a casino world. I think that would be kind of different. In the past, they've done stuff like a theme park, like an amusement park, and I don't think they've ever done a casino. You could have like a lot of interesting imagery and stuff like that, I think, in a casino world. It's kind of different. For the next one, I'd like for there to be a grassland. I know that's also not terribly original, but I like how they did the grassland savanna in Tropical Freeze. I'd like to see something that's kind of similar. I kind of was acting like everything needed to be different. It doesn't all have to be different because some of it has to keep the kind of like Donkey Kong Country vibe, right? I think a grassland could be something that's kind of more of a return to form. It doesn't feel like every level is like really out there and stuff like that. I'd like a grassland, just kind of like Tropical Freeze. That was really cool how they did the savanna, I thought. Next, I would like for them to do an underground ruined city. I know, underground stuff, not really original, but I don't think they've ever done like an underground city as a world before. I think that is a really cool idea. In my mind, it's something kind of like Dark Souls 2's Shalva, the city that has like sunken into the ground. I think that would be really, really interesting. Kind of a different spin on an underground world theme, while also enabling things like maybe minecart levels. Maybe they really want to put minecart levels in for some ungodly reason. I know I don't like the minecart levels, but I just have trauma from the first game, I feel like the first game, those minecart levels were basically like horror levels, So I would like for them to have some sort of like underground city that has been abandoned and it's kind of like embedded into the earth. I think that'd be really, really cool and really different. And you could have the boss be whatever caused the city to like be abandoned, except now that I'm thinking about Donkey Kong fighting Sin from Dark Souls 2. That'd be kind of funny, but I guess Mario kind of did that in Odyssey a little bit, didn't he? Moving on. Next, I would like kind of similar vein, underwater city, kind of Atlantis themed. I know that we usually have some sort of water-y world in Donkey Kong countries. I want it to be an underwater city where you're going through these ruins. I know that like in the past, in Tropical Freeze, there was like underwater stuff, but it felt a little more modern. I kind of want to do away with the modern vibe for this. I want it to be kind of like a bit more storied and ancient feeling and just kind of like mystical. I kind of like that vibe. Probably some sort of chase sequence in this world as well would happen. Maybe with a shark. I feel like we did Kraken last time. It's probably time we have a shark or something, but maybe make him look goofy so that it doesn't traumatize kids like Clanker and Snacker did. I would like for them to also do a spooky kind of graveyard world, and this kind of ties back into King K. Rool having the like coming back from the dead motif. I think that'd be really cool for like a final world maybe. And I want this world to be like so weird and unsettling that it sparks like a flood of new creepypastas. I want it to grab the brains of Nintendo YouTubers and us to just have a dump of lore theory videos. And I want it to just be weird. I want it to be weird. I want it to be unsettling. Maybe you kind of go through the vein of like, at some point, maybe there's a level with like hellfire. Maybe you have like some motifs of like the afterlife in the world as well. I think that'd be really cool. I just want it to be like very, very creepy. I want it to be very creepy. I feel like Donkey Kong 64 actually nailed like the creepy vibe really well. Almost too well, to be honest. I feel like that game, something about the lighting and the color palettes, and just like the world choices, it has a very like unsettling feeling to it sometimes. I want them to kind of do that, but for this one world. Make it weird, make it a bit spooky, cause a lot of Nintendo YouTubers to be full of glee as they run over and start scripting their lore videos. That's what I want. One more world idea that I'd really like. I would like for them to go back to the format where there is a lost world. I would like for them to give us a Krematoa kind of world where it's like you have to get certain collectibles to unlock it, and it has like the kind of true ending. I think that'd be kind of cool with the tropical freeze kind of play style. Kind of a return to form in that regard, but with like, you know, the modernizations of like the newer Donkey Kong Country stuff. I think that would be really cool. There is one thing that I really don't want, and that is another freaking factory level. I am so tired of Donkey Kong games having factory levels. Why does every single Donkey Kong game feel the need to add a factory level? Even the ones in Tropical Freeze, it was like, we don't need to have this. I feel like we just have a factory level here because we always have a factory level. I'm tired. It's not like the jungle level where like, yeah, it's Donkey Kong, he lives in the jungle. Like that makes sense. Why do we always go to a factory? I don't even feel like it matches sometimes what King K. Rool is even doing in some of the older games. It's like we're just going through a factory because it's like, okay, but why? So I say no factory level, none. That is kind of all I have to say about this particular idea for Donkey Kong Country. I just want it to be kind of a return to form in some ways, a reunion with old characters that we miss, and then some kind of newer and more intriguing level ideas that don't feel as repeated. Would you believe me if I told you the original script had 10 ideas? I feel like we'd be here all day. For the final thing for this wish list, I really want a Pokemon Coliseum remake or spiritual successor. I'm okay with either at this point. Back when Pokemon Coliseum came out, I feel as though the general consensus from Pokemon fans is that we believed we were looking at what the series was going to become. And it was a very promising looking future. Now, obviously, Pokemon is still selling well now. There's just a lot of discourse about the mainline games. So when I say I want a Pokemon Coliseum remaster or spiritual successor, this is obviously with the idea that the appropriate amount of development time and resources would be given to the project. You know, I'm expecting at minimum new Pokemon Snap levels of graphics and just the Pokemon feeling that level of alive and real. I don't want it to be like, oh, it's a Pokemon Coliseum remake, but it's a 1-to-1 and it's just soulless and the graphics are muddy and the game is laggy, just kind of like how the mainline games have been. And even, you know, some of the spin-offs have been a little bit that way as well. I want this to be like nice graphically, and I want it to include modernization that adds a lot of quality of life. Now, when it comes to Pokemon Coliseum, there are some issues with the game. I would say the two big ones that I can think of off the top of my head are the fact that whenever you snag a Pokemon, because, you know, the Ore region doesn't have natural Pokemon, which is still just such a weird lore thing. I never really understood that. Kind of just felt like it was like that to be convenient for the gameplay. Kind of felt like it was just like that to be convenient for the gameplay. I feel like the purifying part of the game got a little grindy, and I feel like it made it not fun sometimes. I really like the game, but the grindy part about purifying the shadow Pokemon was just not really great. So I would recommend, if we were to have this remake, or even the spiritual successor, we just have less of a grind so that people can just use the Pokemon they want to use. Another thing is I would really like it if there were multiple opportunities to catch each Pokemon. At least in Coliseum, if you missed out, you just kind of missed out on snagging. And young Amalia did not realize that. So I remember sometimes realizing a little too late, like, oh, I fought that Pokemon and I didn't really understand what we were doing in this game. Oopsies, you know, that kind of dealio, where I accidentally fainted it instead of, you know, snagging it. I feel like maybe making there be multiple opportunities, that would be a little bit more friendly for younger gamers. I'm kind of all about, you know, not necessarily making things too punishing for no reason in video games. Because at the end of the day, it's supposed to be fun. So yeah, I would definitely consider tweaking those particular things. Less grindy and just making it less punishing if you accidentally KO something, right? Or maybe you just didn't understand the mechanic like a certain somebody did. I do think it would be cool to go back to the ore region. I still think it was weird that just for the sake of gameplay, they had it so that no wild Pokemon lived in the ore region. At least that was the case in Colosseum. I'd like to see them kind of revisit that and maybe tweak the lore a little bit. I always thought that was kind of ridiculous. It was seemingly for no reason, at least from what I can remember. I haven't played that game in a hot minute, but I did enjoy the crap out of it. I would like to see them just kind of like try this concept again. I think it makes for a very good spin-off idea, and continue to make this kind of spin-off series that's a little bit more story driven and has these memorable characters and this kind of other region that is mysterious and kind of cool. Has a lot of really iconic, I would say, locations. I feel like they really nailed atmosphere in that game. I'd just like to see them do it again, but in the modern era. If I had to say that the gameplay should change in any particular way, I don't know if I'd want this to have the same kind of gameplay as Legends Arceus exactly, but I do think that open world to some degree would be kind of nice. I do feel like the ore region is kind of barren though, so they'd have to do something different with exploring the world if it was open. I feel like it would be very easy for them to leave it in a state that feels just very empty, and that's never fun. I love open world games, but only when open world is done correctly. And the biggest failure from open world games is that they either don't fill their world, or if they do fill their world, it's with little like busy work quests that are just repetitive and rinse and repeat, and it just feels kind of icky. It's like you marketed your game as open world, but you didn't actually put content in it. I would not want them to do that with this game, and I would want them to, if they were to do something kind of more open world like they've been doing, just to maybe consider an alternate type of gameplay where it is more about exploration than about like battling Pokemon, if that makes any sense at all. I don't know if I have any more specific things about this particular wish, other than just like, you know, adding in the idea of like, if there is some sort of like open world traversal, please let us ride on something. Give us a Pokemon that we can traverse the world with. Preferably an option that gives us like flight at some point. I think that'd be really cool. Kind of similar to Miraidon and Koraidon, where later on they get glide. I think that would be kind of neat. Obviously, this is a kind of gameplay though that is made or broken by, you know, game performance. And while I loved running around on my Pokemon in Scarlet, the experience was brought down tremendously, again, by just graphics and the frames stuttering really badly. So if they do this, I really want them to do it right, which I know is so easy to say, but it's my wish list. Again, I can say it if I want to. Now that was my top 5, but you should tell me your top 5 because I'm feeling nosy today. Let me know your top 5 in the comments if you'd like, and I'm curious to read what you guys want. I do have more I could say about some of those ideas, especially now that I think about them a little bit more, but I'm not going to go in and add more because God knows this video is so long. So if you guys want to hear more about some of these ideas, especially the Star Fox one, I have a lot of ideas about the Star Fox one. Nobody's surprised by this, but let me know. Let me know if you'd like to hear more about the Star Fox idea. I have been brainstorming that for a couple of years now. I really feel like that is an idea that I thought about several years ago. I just thought it would be a cool thing. So let me know if you'd like to hear more about that. Let me know your top 5 in the comments. And we will not end the video yet because there's still something I gotta talk about. I did promise an announcement, and here it is. It will not be an announcement to my Twitch watchers, but recently I have teamed up with 2 other VTubers, Kitsune Eve and Eiko P on Twitch, and we have formed a brand called Kisa. This brand is dedicated to making fun content for you guys, producing our very own merchandise. And my 2 lovely business partners are also offering VTuber management services, although their slots are currently full until 2025. In the future, we may also be doing lore writing commissions for VTubers as well, with the lore being written by yours truly. Kisa is a project we have been working on for, I would say, half of a year to over half of a year, something like that. It has been several months in the making, and we are very excited to have finally announced that. We actually announced it last month, but I didn't really have a good video to kind of like put the announcement on for over here, so I apologize that it's a little late. I really encourage you to not only check out our business socials on Kisa, which I'll put in the description, but also check out Even Eiko as well, especially if you like Souls-like content, Monster Hunter, or just fun times with fun people. They're both really, really funny. Really good streamers. Love them both. Eve, Eiko, and I also host a podcast-like stream every month. We call it the Kisa Yapcast, where we talk about all sorts of things from embarrassing stories to gaming to fashion to food. Usually it gets really cursed though, so fair warning. We're also planning on making convention appearances in the future, and if that is something that happens, I will be sure to let people know on here. So please check out Kisa. We have some big plans. We have some merch already in the works. So keep your eyes out, you know? If you like VTuber merch, we got some really cool stuff already cooking in the oven. Already cooking. Well, that about wraps it up from me. For real this time. If you liked the video, consider giving it a like. And if you want more from little old me, consider hitting the funny subscribe button. I'm gonna go now. Have a good time zone wherever you are. And don't forget to tell me your top 5. I'm really curious. Bye!